There's something about storms that changes how things feel, not louder, just closer. Like the world outside fades and whatever is left settles in around you. Tonight, I'm going to share a few true experiences. Nothing dramatic, nothing extreme, just quiet moments that didn't sit right, the kind that stay with you long after they happen, especially when the rain doesn't stop. Before we unveil this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy the story and it brings you a moment of joy, be sure to subscribe. It was one of those nights where the rain felt constant. Not heavy, not light, just steady, like it had no intention of ending. Daniel had just moved into a small apartment on the second floor of an older building, the kind where the walls feel thinner at night and the hallways seem longer than they should be sometime past midnight. He heard it 2 soft knocks on his door, not loud, not urgent, just enough to be noticed. He stayed still at first thinking maybe it was for someone else, maybe a mistake. But a few seconds later, it came again. Same pattern. 2 knocks. He got up. Slowly, walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No movement, no footsteps. Just a dim light flickering slightly above. He waited, expecting to see someone walk away, but no one did. Eventually, he stepped back and returned to bed, trying not to think too much about it. And just as he started to drift off, it happened again. 2 knocks this time, slower, more deliberate. He didn't move, didn't get up, just lay there listening, focusing on the sound of the rain instead. And after that, nothing. The rest of the night passed quietly. The next morning, he mentioned it casually to his neighbor across the hall before he could finish explaining. She looked at him and asked, "Did it happen twice?" He paused and said yes. She didn't seem surprised, just nodded slightly and said, "It usually stops after the 3rd time." Later that night, the rain came back, the same steady rhythm filling the silence of the apartment, and for a while nothing happened. Everything felt normal until sometime after midnight when he found himself awake again, not because of a sound, but because it felt like he was waiting for one. The room was still the hallway outside silent. And then 2 soft knocks again, exactly the same as before. He stared at the door from his bed, not moving, not reacting, just listening. Seconds passed longer than before. And then there was a 3rd knock, just one this time, quieter than the others, almost like it wasn't meant to be heard. He didn't check the door that night, and in the morning, there was nothing. No sign that anyone had been there. No explanation. Just the memory of the sound blending with the rain and slowly becoming harder to separate from it. There's a certain kind of silence that comes with steady rain. It fills everything and makes small sounds feel more noticeable than they should be. Ifioma had started noticing that she worked from home and spent most of her time alone one evening. While the rain continued without pause, she heard something unusual, a faint and tapping sound, not rhythmic like rain, more irregular like it had intention. She followed it slowly down the short hallway to her bedroom. The sound was coming from the window. 3 soft taps, then a pause, then 2 more. She stood there watching the curtain move slightly from the air in the room before reaching out and pulling it aside. The window was closed, locked, just rain hitting the glass. Nothing else. She checked it, carefully pressing against the frame, making sure it hadn't come loose. Everything felt normal. But as she stepped back into the room, the tapping came again, this time behind her. She turned quickly, but there was nothing, just the room still and quiet. She told herself it was the storm. Old buildings shift. They make sounds that don't always make sense. And for a while, that explanation was enough until later that night when she walked past the bedroom again and noticed something small. The curtain was slightly open, just enough to reveal part of the glass, and on it condensation fogged from the inside, and within that fog, 5 small clear spots spaced unevenly as if something had pressed or tapped from within. She didn't touch it, didn't move closer, just stood there looking at it, trying to understand how it could have happened, when she knew the window had been closed the entire time. Patterns can feel harmless at first, until they repeat in ways you don't expect. Tanda began waking up at the same time every night, 2:17 a.m. At first, it didn't mean anything, just coincidence, maybe stress, maybe the weather, but after several nights in a row, he started noticing something else. Every time he woke up, it was raining, the same steady sound, the same quiet pressure against the windows. He checked the forecast. It didn't match what he was hearing, but every night at exactly 2:17, the rain was there one night instead of going back to sleep. He stayed awake watching the time, 2:16. The room was silent. 2:17. His eyes opened on their own, like they had learned the moment. And that's when he noticed something different. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside a soft movement somewhere in the apartment, subtle enough to question, but clear enough to notice. He stayed completely still. Listening carefully, the sound shifted slightly, then stopped as if whatever caused it had paused. The rain outside seemed louder, or maybe everything else had just gone quieter. Minutes passed without anything else happening. Eventually, he got up, checked every room, every corner. Nothing was out of place. Everything exactly as it should be. But the next night, it happened again, 2:17, and this time the sound was already there before he opened his eyes. Already present, already inside. Storms have a way of interfering with things, signals, connections, timing. Kami noticed that one night when her phone rang unknown number, she almost ignored it. But something about the moment made her answer hello. There was no response, just a low static sound, steady and consistent. She waited about to hang up when she heard something faint, almost blending into the noise. It sounded like breathing, calm, slow, not rushed. She pulled the phone away slightly, then back again. It was still there. She spoke again, asking who it was, and immediately the breathing stopped, replaced by silence. Then the call ended. She checked the number. Nothing saved, no identification. She tried calling back, but it didn't go through, just an error message later. That night, as the rain continued, her phone lit up again. Same unknown number. This time, she didn't answer. She just watched the screen. The call lasted longer than before. Then stopped a few seconds later. Her phone buzzed again. A voicemail. She opened it. It was only a few seconds long. No voice, no static. Just the sound of rainstorms. Don't create things. They don't add anything new. They just make certain details easier to notice. Small sounds, small patterns, small moments that feel slightly out of place. And maybe that's all these were. Or maybe some things are just easier to hear when everything else goes quiet and when the rain doesn't stop. Sometimes it feels like those moments don't either. And once you start noticing small things, it becomes harder to ignore them, especially when they don't fully go away, just fade slightly into the background, like they're waiting for you to stop paying attention. The rain had a way of doing that, making everything feel slower, more distant, but at the same time more present. Like every small detail had more weight than usual. Daniel tried not to think about the knocks after that third night. He told himself it was just timing, just coincidence. Something in the building, shifting pipes, settling sounds, traveling through walls in ways that didn't make sense. But even with that explanation, he still found himself listening more carefully each night, not expecting anything, just aware of the silence in a way he hadn't been before. The hallway outside his apartment always sounded empty, but now it felt intentionally quiet, like it was holding that silence instead of simply being still. One night, as the rain continued in that same steady pattern, he heard something so different. Not a knock. Not this time, but a soft movement just outside his door, like fabric, brushing lightly against the surface. He didn't move at first, just listened. The sound was faint but consistent, like something shifting slowly, then stopping, then shifting again. He got up carefully, stepping closer to the door without making noise, and stood there for a moment just looking at it before leaning in slightly. Not enough to make contact, just enough to listen more clearly. The sound stopped completely the moment he got close. Not faded, not moved, just stopped. Like it had been interrupted. He waited a few seconds longer, then looked through the peephole again. The hallway was empty, exactly like before. No movement, no sound. Nothing that explained what he had just heard, but something felt slightly different this time, not outside but inside the apartment. Behind him, he turned slowly, expecting to see something out of place, but everything looked the same. The same furniture, the same stillness, the same quiet presence of the room, and yet it didn't feel exactly the same as before, like something had shifted in a way that couldn't be seen, only noticed in the way the space felt around him. He didn't sleep much that night, not because of fear, but because of attention. Like his mind was trying to stay ahead of something it couldn't fully understand. Ifioma started keeping her bedroom door closed after that night, not locked, just closed. She didn't have a reason she could explain it. Just felt better that way. The rain continued over the next few days, sometimes lighter, sometimes heavier, but always there in the background, filling the silence of the apartment. One evening, she noticed something else. Something, small at first, easy to overlook. The tapping didn't happen again. Not on the window, not anywhere else. But every now and then, she would hear a soft shift from inside the room. Not loud, not distinct, just enough to notice if she was paying attention. And each time it happened, she would stop whatever she was doing and listen carefully, trying to understand where it came from. But it never repeated in the same way. Twice, sometimes it sounded closer to the window, sometimes nearer to the door, and once it sounded like it came from somewhere lower near the floor, but every time she opened the door to check, the room was exactly the same. Nothing out of place. Nothing moved. Nothing that explained the sound. And yet the feeling remained that something had happened just before she looked, like she was always a moment too late. One night during a heavier storm, a power went out for a few seconds, not long enough to be concerning, just enough to interrupt the normal rhythm of the apartment. When the lights came back on, everything seemed normal again, except for one detail. The bedroom door was slightly open, just a few inches. She stood there looking at it, trying to remember if she had left it that way, but she was certain she hadn't. She always closed it completely now. It had become a habit, something automatic. She walked slowly toward it and stopped just before reaching the door. Listening carefully, the room inside was silent. No movement, no sound, just the faint echo of rain against the window. She pushed the door open gently and looked inside. Everything appeared unchanged. But as she stepped closer, she noticed the curtain again slightly shifted. Not open, not closed, just moved enough to feel different and on. The window. The condensation had returned faint but visible, and within it, new marks, not 5 this time, but several small, uneven shapes like incomplete patterns that didn't fully connect. She didn't try to interpret them, didn't move closer, just stood there for a moment before quietly stepping back and closing the door again. Tunde stopped checking the time after a while. It didn't matter anymore. His body already knew when to wake up, and every night it was the same. The rain, the stillness, and the sense that something else was present in the apartment, not visible, not defined, just there in the same space. One night, he decided to change something small instead of staying in his bedroom. He moved to the living room before going to sleep, thinking that maybe a different environment would interrupt whatever pattern had formed. He left the bedroom door. I opened this time and lay down on the couch listening to the rain as it continued outside. Eventually, he drifted off, but when he woke up again, he already knew what time it was without looking. 2:17. The rain was still there, but something else was different. The sound inside the apartment felt closer, not in another room, not behind a wall, but somewhere within the same space as him. He stayed still, his eyes closed, focusing only on what he could hear. The sound was subtle, a slight shift of weight maybe, or the faintest movement of air, but it didn't move away. It stayed in one place, steady and quiet, like it was waiting. He opened his eyes slowly and looked toward the bedroom. The door was no longer open. It was closed completely. He was sure he had left it open. He remembered that clearly, but now it stood shut with no sound of it having moved. He didn't get up. I immediately didn't approach it. Just watched from where he was listening carefully, But nothing else happened after a while. The rain softened, and the apartment returned to that same empty silence. But the next morning, the door was open again, exactly the way he had left it. Kemi started turning her phone face down at night after that, not because she expected another call, but because she didn't want to see it. If it happened again, something about the unknown number stayed with her. Not the call itself, but the way it felt like it had waited for her to answer, like it wasn't random. Just timed one evening as the rain picked up again, she noticed something small. Her phone screen lit up briefly. Not a call, not a notification, just a faint flicker, like it had activated for a second and then stopped. She picked it up, checked it, nothing new, no missed calls, no messages. Everything looked normal. She set it back down but kept watching it for a few seconds longer, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. At least not right away later that night as the storm continued, the same steady sound filling the room. She heard it again. Not from the phone, but somewhere nearby. A soft, faint sound similar to what she had heard during the call. Not static. Not quite breathing, but close enough that it felt familiar. She looked around the room slowly, trying to locate where it was coming from. But it didn't seem to come from a specific place. It was just there, present in the background, blending with the rain. She stayed still, listening carefully, and after a few seconds, it stopped completely, just like before, sudden and clean, leaving no trace of where it had been. Storms don't change spaces. They reveal them. They make certain things easier to notice, not because those things are new, but because everything else becomes quieter, and when the noise fades, what remains can feel unfamiliar, even if it's always been there. The rain continued like it always did, steady, consistent, almost predictable. And yet within that consistency, something felt slightly off. Not enough to be certain, not enough to explain, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. And once you start paying attention, it becomes harder to stop, because even when nothing is happening, it can feel like something almost is